Southern CSOs are being invited. Time for these consultations is short, and the resources are very limited. The policy framework induces Dutch CSOs to take a center stage rather than a supporting role. And this programming that's initiated from the north doesn't do justice to local dynamics in the south. So we look for ways how this can be reversed, and how programming can start from the south. And Margit van Wessel, sitting here in front, has been a lot of thinking about that, and actually I'm just borrowing these ideas from her. But we are going to incorporate that in our recommendations for sure. Now there's also a problem with the control over resources. If you read the policy, you will find that in the chapter on the objectives and principles that, and I quote, decision-making on goals, responsibilities, implementation, funding, and distribution of resources is a joint responsibility shared equally by every organization in the partnership. End quote. But if you continue reading and get to the sections about financial management, you will find that the rules and regulations for accountability imply that the lead partner is expected to control the other partners. So there is a contradiction in the policy between the principle of power sharing and between the principle of being accountable. Now that's put the lead organizations in a very difficult position, of course. So we want to think about how can we address that contradiction in the next policy framework that's going to come. These are just two of the topics that we are addressing. We are with a group of 6 people, but we also have a sounding board group that we will call together soon. And then we'll give just the full story of what we have been thinking, and we will also ask that group for feedback. So there's still plenty of room in that sounding board group, so you're all welcome to join. Please let me know if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Heinz, for this. Can I invite you to join me here on the chairs? We're going to go straight to our next speaker, and she is joining us online. Zunera Rana from Radboud University. Zunera, can you hear me? Yes, there you are.
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Hi, welcome. You will tell us about the Power Awareness Tool.
Yes, I will be talking about the Power Awareness Tool. So good morning, everyone, and apologies that I'm not there in person for today's meeting.
That's okay.
I have been working on the evaluation of the Power Awareness Tool together with my colleague Willem from Radboud University and Heinz, who just introduced himself as well. If you go on to the next slide, I could briefly explain what the Power Awareness Tool is about. It talks about the imbalances that exist between partnerships that are built between Global North and Global South. So far, we don't have a tool that talks about these power imbalances, and through the Power Awareness Tool, we want to enable a discussion or a critical reflection of the partnerships that exist between CSOs from Global North and Global South. And now that the Power Awareness Tool has been out in the world for some years and is being used by many organizations as well, we wanted to do an evaluation to check its effectiveness and user-friendliness. For this, we opted for a methodology including focus group discussions separately from CSOs from Global North who have used the tool and from the Global South as well. And this was followed by a survey where we got 33 respondents, 22 of which were from the Global South. Next slide, please. So moving on to what does the tool really do, I will not spend too much time on it, but just to tell you very briefly, it consists of 3 steps. In the first step, we want to identify the decision-making topics, and in the second step, we want to highlight the scores that each partners feel that they have a role to play within those decision-making topics. And in the third step, we reflect on these scores and to see to what extent each partner has a decision-making power. Next slide, please. Moving on to our survey results, we saw, as I mentioned briefly, we had 33 respondents, and very nice, a lot of them from the Global South. From Global North, all our CSOs were from the Netherlands, while from the South, the biggest chunk was from South Sudan. When we asked them about at what stage do they use their have they used the tool, the most common answer was that it was used to assess an existing partnership, while very few of them also said this big line in the middle, that's to assess the existing partnerships, while some of them also used it to start a new partnership. Next slide, please. We also wanted to check the effectiveness of the power awareness tool. What was interesting we found here was that most of the organizations, so 46%, had actually come up with follow-up actions after the exercise of PAT, while 33% said that they are at least in the process of coming up with follow-up actions. Only 18% said that they have not come up with any actions. Looking at the overall satisfaction of the tool to start a conversation, with 1 being not at all and 5 being a lot of conversations started, we got an average score of around 3.5, which shows that the tool has been quite successful in at least starting a debate about the power relationships. Moving on to the next slide, we also wanted to ask about the overall satisfaction, and we saw that the satisfaction generally is quite high, and this is specifically higher in non-Dutch CSOs compared to the Dutch CSOs. So they highly appreciated the process of discussion of power or reflection on partnerships. Altogether, 94% of the CSOs said that they would be willing to have this as a regular part of their program. And finally, in the next slide, we talk about the main benefits that there have been for using PAT. We highlight just the main 3 ones. The first one being the top one being enhanced awareness about power relations, and to a certain extent also to identify areas of improvement within partnership. We also asked for some improvement in PAT. These we will be taking along if we go on to the next slide, and the final slide, in developing a workshop for recommendations for PAT 2.0. We'll be finalizing our report. If you would like to be part of this workshop, you're welcome to reach out to us, and Heinz is there to answer any questions as well. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Sunera. Thank you, and please stay online if you can for questions. We have one more action, and then we'll go into the first round of Q&A. And that's going to be presented by Merel van der Woude from Butterfly Works, and it's about the Shift the Power Atlas.
Get the clicker. Good morning. I'm here to represent the group that has worked on the Atlas. We're a bigger group of people. It's been led by Butterfly Works and the Hunger Project. And we worked on a very practical question. So there's all these tools that we've been talking about on how do you do your work more inclusive, more participatory, how to facilitate co-creation. And there's a lot out there. We just heard about the Power Awareness tool. So there's so many tools, but how do you navigate them? And this group came from a working group that started already last year, where we did regular exchanges, sharing tools. But we were looking at, can we create an atlas that is online, where you can navigate tools on your own, and it will help you to bring you to the right atlas. So a very tangible solution. We worked, I'm going to see if this is because it's a video. Yeah. So what we've been working on is several sessions with our group, where we looked at what tools are out there. We made a small start. Of course, there's much more out there, but we started with a small batch of resources. And together we looked at, okay, how would we tag them? What would we look for? And based on that, we created prototypes. And we came up with this idea where you have a platform where you can look for resources through filters, but also you can comment on these resources and they're rated, so you hear from other organizations how they've used it. And most importantly, you can upload your own. So it's a shared atlas. It's not one organization owning it, but it should be a continuous process where we all collect these resources. And this work was done with the group by, as I said, starting to collect those resources, creating tags, and then we had several co-creation sessions with our team And based on those sessions, we created 3 prototypes. It was a very creative process. This is the analysis of our prototypes. We had 3 different formats, so we made this build from scratch tool, but we also tried out existing community platforms to look, is it much more of a community exercise? We also looked at existing online libraries. We looked at different visual styles and what are the most important features. This was tested within our group, so a quite small collective of people testing it. And so the first outcomes have been processed in that prototype that I just presented. And we would really like to take it further. So we would really like to have more people test it, get more feedback, so that we can make it, this is just a clickable prototype, but we can make it into a reality. So yeah, we're looking for more people who can test this prototype. We have some simple guidelines, and so it will take like 15 minutes, especially outside our network here. And also to create a community connection, to have many more people add resources. We're also aware that the resources we currently have come from mostly NGOs in the global north. So we would love to have many more resources from across the globe. So feel free to reach out to me. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to become part of the group. You can also just share input. Yeah, and then we look forward to sharing a finished tool later on.
Thank you so much, Merel. Lovely dress also, by the way. So let's take a few moments to answer questions. And if you're watching from online, you're also very welcome to join us in this Q&A using Mentimeter. For that, you can go to menti.com and then use the code 53973967. And we'll check in a bit if there's questions from you watching over there. So for now, for here, who has a burning question for any of the 3 speakers? Zunura is also still here. It was all very clear. Any questions? Yeah, please. Do we have a mic? Yeah. Is the mic on? No. Hello, hello. Should we try another one? Okay. Yeah.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
I was feeling the pressure now to ask you a question. I had 2 questions. One is for the first speaker, relation to partnerships. And I think you mentioned that lead organization, which is currently the common standard of practice, where there's a lead organization that holds the purse, so to speak. And I'm wondering in your conversations whether there's a room to dismantle the aspect and have co-ownership between partners. So in a sense of not having one lead organization, you have 2 or 3 who are answerable to you or to a donor, to a funder, as opposed to having one. Because I think having that structure also creates inequalities or imbalances between partnerships. So I think just a thought within your thinking, if that could also be applied.
Is it for any of the speakers or?
Especially the first speaker, because he did speak about.
Yeah, please, yeah. This one should work.
Does it work? Is it working? Yeah, okay, great. It's not really a question. I think it's a suggestion that we haven't really thought about yet. But I think we just take that on board and just, in our thinking process, and just look at what are possibilities with that construction that you're suggesting.
Great.
Well, thank you for that input. And you had a second question, you said?
I had a second question for the presenter as well. I think there was a little response from non-Dutch organizations saying the the research, or I can't remember exactly, but there's a little response from non-Dutch organizations saying that it was successful. Or
They liked the tool, yeah.
The tool was successful. And I'm wondering why that is the case.
Why the non-Dutch organizations were more excited about it, yeah. Do you know why that's the case, Sunara?
What was really interesting was that the response for satisfaction was higher, so they were more satisfied with the exercise itself, even though they said that the results were not as much. We also included a question if it led to some friction, and we got responses that in some cases the partnership did lead to some friction as well. So maybe that is why the dissatisfaction element might exist. But Heinz, maybe you want to add something to it?
Well, I don't really know, because I think we didn't really ask them the question, why are you satisfied that much? But I believe that for CSOs in the South, there's a lot of benefit to use the tool to start talking about power. It's a very low threshold. This tool provides a very low threshold to put the discussion about power, to put it on the table. And it is not, I think it's not very confrontational. We also see that in a minority of cases, it has caused frictions. And I believe that the tool is a very easy way to discuss power. So I think that might be the reason why they're satisfied with it.
Yeah, exactly. As a pathway to start the discussion. Thank you. We had another question here. Yes.
Hi, thanks for the presentations. My question is for the last speaker. In your presentation, there seems to be an inherent assumption that the findability of the tool is one of the bottlenecks in usability of these tools. So my question is that true? And is the second part, is the solution really to build another tool to find these tools? Because then you will need to build another tool to find your tool.
Well.
Yeah, good question. So well, the problem we wanted to address is the findability. We also discussed a lot about the usability. So that's why so far, this has been the first exploration, we added the comments and the rating, which was an important add-on that came out, that we want to also be able to get a rate, which how do you use a tool, have feedback from other organizations. And we had quite a lot of discussions indeed about how do you create another tool, who owns it? Should it be more of a community? I think it's still an open debate. It could become a community, but also that needs to be maintained. So it's the first starting point, but I would love to invite you to join that next phase, to prototype it further and to be critical.
Great, thank you for that. You can keep it, yeah. We have some questions from online as well. Let's have a look. Come back here. Yes. So this is the one we're going to choose. At the moment, shifting power relationship is a growing conversation, which is great, but it's not a requirement. How do you think more equal partnership can be fostered or encouraged on a more structural level in the long term? Who of you would like to take that up? Heinz?
When I saw organizations using the tool, or partnerships using the tool, then very often it was said, when they were already in the middle of a project or a program, that it was said, we wish we had done this when we started. And then another remark that we heard very often is, we should do this more often. Because with every time that you use, for example, this power awareness tool, you see things that are not right in your power relationships, and you can take corrective measures. But if you are a year down the road, then maybe there is growing insight that there are more issues than only those. So if you do that on a regular basis, then very structurally, systematically, you work towards more.
But the question is also asking, that's like still a voluntary thing. Okay, let's do it more often. But how can it really be more institutionalized, maybe, or more structurally? We always think about shifting power, and not just when we like.
Well, I think voluntarily, I think you can institutionalize it if organizations say, if partnerships, and partnerships are also institutions, if they say, this is what we are going to do on a regular basis.
So it's still a choice, you would say?
Well, it's always a choice of someone somewhere.
Yeah.
But I think let's start at that level. I mean, if you want to start with that the policy should make it mandatory that these things should be done, but that is going to be also very prescriptive. Then the policy suggests that they know exactly how to do that. But that's something that you could consider also, of course. But there is already in the policy quite a lot that is saying these things should be addressed.
Yeah.
So putting it in there is also not enough. So in a way, it is institutionalized, it's in the policy, but how to do it is a different matter. And that's what we are finding out going through these exercises, what we are doing in these 6 working groups. How can we do it?
Yeah, and maybe organization can also be more vocal about what you're saying, how useful it is, like how it helps, so that it becomes more...
Sure.
All right, thank you. I suggest that is it okay if you keep your question for the next round of questions?
I'm fine.
Yeah, so that we can hear more speakers, and then I won't forget. Okay, I would love to invite Susan Wilkinson from CIMAVI about the Organization 360 tool. Let's give her a hand.
Hi, good morning. Thanks very much. As introduced, my name is Susan Wilkinson. I'm with CIMAVI, and I have the pleasure of being the facilitator for the Action 3, which is on what's called an organizational 360 tool. And we've been a group of 8 organizations working together on this. And we focused on a really specific problem or situation. And I think we're all familiar with the move within the international development sector and within organizations to revisit and reconsider how we partner and our partnerships. And what we realized when we came together is that there's a lot of INGOs who are committed to more fair and equitable partnerships. And these policies and these intentions are in place, but action is lagging behind. So there's perhaps more talk than walk. And so we came together as a group of 8 organizations who wanted to address this and figure out what we could do in a small way about this. And so we've met 3 times over the last 6 months. And first we just came together to share and to understand why we're all in the room, why we're all interested in this, and what we thought might be a way to approach this. And then a smaller group of us then went to work and thought, well, how do we pull that together and come up with some sort of draft tool or draft instrument? And then third, another group of us came together to actually role play it, to give it a bit of a go. And that really helped us to draw up more lessons and to see where some of the challenges or limitations or strengths were. And to start with, what we really found out was there was a lot of sort of systemic barriers and around moving towards more equitable relationships. And one was really like, who should be initiating this? Who should be leading the conversation or leading the action? And second was around language. What language do we use? And third was around the parameters of what do we actually mean by fair and equitable. I think there was a consensus in the room that we do a lot as INGOs, we spend a lot of time talking to ourselves and using our own reference points. And we really wanted to challenge ourselves to move beyond that. And so what we actually came up with, and what we realized is we actually need a dialogic tool. We need to actually have a conversation and a dialogue and to get people in the room. And so I just want to go through quickly sort of what this tool looks like and what it does. So we came up with a dialogue or a conversation tool, which was really made up of 3 parts. And the first part was more around self-reflection and exchanging of views and perspectives. And there's just some simple questions. What are my rights and obligations as a local partner to an INGO? And likewise, what are my rights and obligations as an INGO to a local partner? And then have a bit of a discussion about where there are agreements or disagreements, matches or mismatches. So we start sort of putting it out there. And then the second element is to really co-define terms. So, how do we define fair and equitable relationships? What do we consider to be the key elements of it, of a fair and equitable relationship? And what would markers or milestones be that we could gauge our performance against over time? And I think that comes to the previous question around how do we sort of make this structural and embed it into our practice? And then what together would be our assessment of what some of the immovable barriers are? What are some of the blocks that are really preventing both parties from changing their practice? And so that's really what the tool looks like. And what I haven't elaborated here, but if people are interested, I'm happy to share it. We developed sort of this spider diagram with 6 different arms or elements or features that could be relevant. And the idea is that through conversations, the groups would populate those and populate the markers and the milestones. Some learnings to date. I'm just going to focus on 6 really quickly. One is we realize that discussion needs to happen actually at the highest level. Often it happens at the program officer or program manager level, and we realize this really has to happen at the director and the board level. And secondly, we realized we can't be talking about organizational change. We really have to be looking at relational transformation. So that's a bit of a nuance there. And also we realized through role-playing the tool that, okay, it's fine to have this dialogue, these questions that we want to go through, but we really have to start focusing now a lot more on process. And we realized that this really has to be a facilitated process. And it raised some discussion among ourselves. Well, who do we need? Is it a facilitator, a mediator, a negotiator? So that's still something we're grappling with. And we also realize that every context and every situation is different. So how fair and equitable is understood is really going to be various. And also we realize that there has to be some preparations and pre-convening before INGOs and local partners come into the room together. And then finally, we realize that there is going to be tension. It's not going to... Everyone's not going to agree, and we have to prepare for tension. So that's really where we've got to. And the invitation is really, we're at the stage now where we want to pilot test this. 2 organizations have stepped forward and willing to do that, and we're looking for others who are also interested. And through the generosity of Partos, we actually have some resources which we can commit to support organizations, for example, in hiring a facilitator to help them do this process. So that's where we are.
Thank you. Thank you. Susan, please join us as well here. The next action that we're going to hear about is the Handbook for Inclusive Communication, and it's presented by video by Sarah Gomez.
Hello, my name is Sarah Gomez. I work at Partos on communication. And last April, we started a community of practice on inclusive communication together with the Expertise Centrum of Humanitarian Communication. And the aim of this community is to explore together how we can learn and how we can innovate on topics of inclusive communication, not only through the stories we tell or the narratives we use, but also in the content productions and in the way we work with our international partners. So we organized several sessions. One of them was about power and history. We created a future brief. It's a sort of starting document where we dive into history and in the ways colonialism still affects our work today. Other topics we will explore is content production and images and language. So we want to create a handbook full of guidelines and best practices. And we hope that this will help organizations in creating more inclusive working methods. We will share it at the end of this year. So please, if you want to follow our activities, let me know and I will give you all the updates. To conclude my talk, I would like to share a personal learning. Last year at this festival, we had a great speaker, Anne Murray from Lamb Sisterhood. And she said to me, you NGOs, you tend to focus on creating tools and handbooks for future steps, but sometimes you forget to really look back at history and learn from it. Listen to your partners and your communities. Be aware of your role in history and position in existing unbalanced power relations in an unjust system. Therefore, in honor of her message, I would like to invite on stage the musician Álvaro Pinto Lion, who will sing a famous song from Leon Gieco, which exactly speaks about colonialism in South America and its devastating effects on the lives of so many generations. This song is about 500 years of colonization of the indigenous people, and it's called 5 Centuries the Same, 5 siglos igual.
Soledad sobre ruinas, sangre en el trigo, rojo y amarillo, manantial del veneno, escudo, heridas, 5 siglos igual, libertad sin galopes, banderas rotas, soberbia y mentiras, medallas de oro y plata, contra esperanzas, 5 siglos igual. En esta parte de la tierra, la historia se cayó, como se caen las piedras aún las que tocan el cielo y están cerca del sol, y están cerca del sol. Desamor, desencuentro, perdón y olvido, verbo con mineral, pueblos trabajadores, infancias pobres, 5 siglos igual, lealtad sobre tumbas, piedra sagrada, Dios no alcanzó a llorar, sueño largo del mal, hijos de nadie, 5 siglos igual, muerte contra la vida, gloria de un pueblo desaparecido, es comienzo, es final, leyenda perdida, 5 siglos igual. En esta parte de la tierra, la historia se cayó, como se caen las piedras aún las que tocan el cielo y están cerca del sol, y están cerca del sol. Es tiniebla con flores, revoluciones, y aunque muchos no están, nunca nadie pensó besarte los pies, 5 siglos igual.
Woo! Woo, 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 woo! That was beautiful. Thank you. Álvaro Pinto Lion. I really loved it. Thank you. Playing on the bombo, by the way. It's the name of the instrument. Ooh. Nice. Beautiful. 5 siglos igual. 5 centuries of the same, and we're still in it, actually. We're going to listen to our last action, number 6. And it's going to be presented by Margit van Wessel from Wageningen University about research on the unintended effects of shift the power strategies. Welcome, Margit.
We are a research project with a large team of researchers looking into the actual experiments.
The mic?
Sorry, I have to move near the mic. Sorry, yes.
Or you can have a handheld if you like.
Yeah, it's a little bit more, more dynamic. I don't like so much standing. Thanks so much. Does it work? Yeah. It works? Okay, thank you. Yes, so we know that many of us are frustrated. We see things are happening slow, 5 centuries the same, and we hear the frustration in many voices that we hear today and at other times as well. I think we're all familiar with that. But we also know that there's a lot of experimentation going on, a lot of initiatives that could inspire, that we could learn from, and that could help move things forward. And if we think that we should look at these actions. So we are together in a team to get a sense for what is actually going on. And we are trying to look at the concrete actions, to follow those, see how they develop over time, and learn from them. And we do that with a large team, as you can see, also supported by Partos. So thanks so much, Partos, for your support in this. We are an international team with some researchers, 3 of us from the Netherlands, and my colleague Lau Schulp is also here in the room with me. Willem Elbers is also part of our team. He's also in this building. You'll see him maybe later today. Nikki Banks from the University of Manchester. And then 2 researchers from Ghana and 2 researchers from Uganda. So we're really seeking to have a strong country-based perspective on what's going on, especially also because those developments in countries in the global south, when it comes to shifting power, are underlit a lot of the time. So we're trying to get a sense for the full scope of types of initiatives that are happening, and to get a sense for the different types of developments in different settings. And we're trying to do that using all kinds of methods. One of the most important ones is a survey of organizations internationally, but also in the global south, and then also looking very closely into Ghana and Uganda with the help of our country-based researchers also. Interviews in international settings as well as in these 2 countries. Review of documented initiatives that are already there to get a sense for the scope on that front. But also case studies, looking more in-depth into promising examples in the countries, because those tend to be underlit much more than initiatives that originate in the global north or are being developed there. We also have an international sounding board, 27 people, experts from the global north and south to give us feedback, to be critical on what we're doing, and to support us with their knowledge and insights. So what we hope to achieve is a mapping of initiatives, that we have a sense for what is actually going on, how should we understand that, how should we differentiate between the different types of initiatives that we have, how do they actually address power, and how successful are they in that. So we're trying to look especially also for promising examples, to look into more deeply, and also to investigate the types of initiatives that are promising over time, to be much more concrete than we can be now about how could these be used, what exactly works and what doesn't. So we're hoping to also continue this research as we move forward in the coming years. So that would be, I think, very helpful. But of course, we'll have to see first, step by step, how we're taking things forward, what comes out of these different initiatives. So we see it as these different steps. So we see it as an iterative process, so to say. But each time that we've achieved something like the completion of the survey analysis, case studies, we hope to get back to the community, to Partos, to the Dutch government and other actors with insights and ideas and recommendations. We also really believe that this is a collective effort. We really need all kinds of organizations trying things, knowing about things that are happening, to let us know that we can actually fulfill this promise of capturing the diversity and the significance of that. This survey was launched this week, the survey that we just mentioned. And please, if you can scan this and get to the survey this way and fill it out, it would be very nice for our initiative. So thanks so much for doing that. You'll also find the survey on LinkedIn, maybe also other channels in the weeks to come. Maybe your contacts will send you the survey. Of course, we're not in control of who gets it, but this is at least, a first way to try it. So thanks so much.
Great. Okay, thank you to all of our speakers. We're now complete. 6 actions have been explained. We would love to do another 10 minutes of questions. So if you're watching online, you can see it again. You go to menti.com, the code 53973967, and we'll definitely make sure to also include questions from there. But let's start with this person who had a question in the last round.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm working for the GPAC Foundation, and GPAC Foundation is a member-led organization. So we had that discussion on shifting the power, I think, already years ago. And for instance, in our board, we are a Dutch foundation, but in our board, the majority of the board members are members from the south. So they are in the power, so to say. And so we consider ourselves as a promising initiative, I would say. And Margit, you also know GPAC. So I was just wondering whether that would, because I scanned your the code, of course. So I will be talking about this in our organization. But I was just wondering whether you would consider that also as a sort of a promising initiative because of our structure.
Says your initiative.
Well, absolutely. I've always seen GPAC as an organization very committed to addressing power relations. With your networked approach, I think you can in fact set an example. I also wrote that in reporting on GPAC that we did for the Dutch government. And I hope that also you can let us know what's been going on, how we can maybe learn from that and include that in our study, please. Yes, absolutely.
Great. Good idea to drink coffee together later. Yes, another question in front here. Yeah, it's coming.
Yeah, thanks. Merel, it's actually a question to you. Susan's tool will undoubtedly be part of the Atlas later on. But you were talking about tools and resources. It's a very informative question from my side, because I'm still struggling a bit to understand the difference between tools and resources. What actually qualifies to be taken up in the Atlas? Everything that simply comes to our mind, that we can think of might be interesting to somebody else, or what?
That is how we started. So our process was, let's collect, as the group that we had, whatever we think is interesting for others to learn from in shifting the power. And then we started looking at, okay, how can you qualify it? And we currently, but it's a prototype, so we have different tags and we have tools that you can apply. We have tools about learning, so cases that you can read and learn from. We have more courses, methodologies. So, and it's a growing database, but that's been our whole exploration, identifying what works. And I think that's why one of the main outcomes was that we need a way of rating and sharing, and that community part of it is so important.
Yeah, thank you. Bart has a question, yes.
Thank you. Susan referred, and also I think Heinz referred to this system and some systematic barriers. But you were looking into the internal NGO relations. But one of the most important actors herein in the system, in the ecosystem, are donors. And could you please elaborate on the role of donors? And it's very often not just one donor, it's many donors engaged or involved in these partnerships.
Yeah, maybe I could start with that. And I think that's something, Bert, that we really want to test as we pilot this, because we have exactly identified that as one of the systemic barriers is policy or is donor situation or board situations. And I think we're really interested to find out to what extent that really is a barrier or a sort of a hard block, and what some of the strategies are around moving around that or not. So definitely we've really identified that as something that needs to be addressed. So I think the first step is to really hear how are people experiencing that, and then figure out, well, how do we then react or respond to that?
A lot of people in the front row have questions. I'm curious if there's online, is there a question as well? Yes, let's do that. And then we'll come to you. All right, so the question is, what is investigated about in regarding to shifting power on the use of a quota? Board-wise, at least 50% should be members from the Global South or regarding aid spending. So quota in who are the decision makers, who should be at the table. Anyone want to respond to that? Anyone had looked into that? Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks. Just somewhere has to start, so I'll just be a little bit spontaneous here. I'm not sure whether I would see it in terms of quota, but some hard standards regarding allocation of funds and organization of control in the structure of governance, for example, I think would be very helpful, because that sets a direction that makes it much more concrete what should actually happen. To meet also the barrier that there are lots of practices and habits and interests that work against change. So hard standards, for example, from the side of donors regarding governance structures and allocation of funding, I think would help a lot. Like, for example, when the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs decided to make it compulsory for the Powers Voices partnership to have Southern partners in the consortium, that was the first time that actually many more Southern partners were part of consortia. And I think also the requirement for the Power of Voices program to have a very developed vision on what the vision was on collaboration with Southern partners, I think that put a lot of organizations to think about it much more seriously, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I think, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, indeed. In the requirements and governance and control of what happens. Yeah, thank you. We have time for one more question here. We have several. Let's see how fast we can run it. Well, yeah, we had a question there in the back. Okay, let's do two then.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, so one of the questions I had is that a lot of donors have maybe a bias toward organizations that are better resourced, better staffed, which ends up being more so northern organizations. So how do you, even inadvertently with donors, even if they don't intend to, they end up choosing the better resourced organizations, which are often northern. So how do you address that resource and capacity gap to shift the power, even if there's a resource or capacity disparity?
Interesting. Who would like to take that? Margit is... Yeah, please, yeah.
Should I? Okay, yeah, I don't want to talk too much, but just end up doing that usually. Well, one thing that I think is could help there is for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to maybe reconsider the requirement to be a very large program, right? The ministry prefers large programs. 40 million euro is better than 2, but maybe 2 is better for young organizations that are not formalized and professionalized, to get a better chance to come in, and that can also be accommodated in different ways. For example, some organizations, they facilitate that sort of thing, right? They come in as an organization that distributes funds among small organizations. The ministry is already doing that. Initiatives like that, I think, could be expanded also to the larger program to get more of a keen eye to locally embedded, otherwise powerful organizations. So we do not have necessarily a very developed financial management or more informal, maybe not even have a formal setup, but who are very important in their context. So that would be some entry points for that, I think.
Thank you. Do you want to comment in one sentence? Because I want to go to the last question, yeah.
One sentence. I think we also need to move towards reassessing what we consider to be capacity and what capacity matters. I think if we can do that, we'll be dealing with different actors.
Interesting question to leave us with. What is capacity? Yeah. Thank you. What do you value? Yeah. I feel there's more to say about this.
No, we exclude because of our filter on that, and I think it's a very deep systemic issue.
Can you illustrate just super briefly, like what do we exclude?
Well, we can say already that we value the capacity to manage funds.
Yeah.
We value formal governance structures over commitment, passion, local knowledge, other forms of capital.
Exactly,
social
yeah,
capital,
that makes it very
capital,
clear.
Reputational capital.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Thank you. Our last question, if we can keep it. Oh. It's been covered. Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Thanks. I think Susan's comment now is a bit opening the door for my question or puzzle, because everything that's been, or most of things are structural. And for me, that all falls into like discursive practices, what we do and how we structure and how we. But for me, actually, and I'm curious what the participants would say about ideational background, what we believe is good for whom, what development we are advocating for, whether that's married with neoliberal capitalism, which is extractive, linking back to the opening, like ideas that we hold. Yeah. And I think that's when we are talking about systemic problems.
Not just the implementation
much bigger issue that we need to tackle and unpack than structures and forms and types of capacities or procedures or whatever.
So who decides what we're striving for, actually? Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good addition in itself. I don't know if anyone wants to comment on it. Heinz, yeah, lastly.
Well, I agree. I think that what the sector has to learn is to much more listen to what's happening on the ground and try to support that. And at the moment, I see there's too much going the other way around, that the ideas are developed here and then are trickling southwards, and that's where then they are being implemented. And I think it has to be just completely the other way around. And that's also why that idea of starting from the south, I think, is so important. But we have to fill it in. What does it mean? How do you do that? We have to develop new types of capacities. We should get much better ears and much better antennas to understand what's going on and where support is needed.
Do you have any idea already of what could be those eyes and antennas, how that could be organized?
Well, I think it's also by training people, by just making sure that people learn how to listen more. People working with CSOs, not only in the north, but also national CSOs in the south, have to become much more analytical, much more observative, instead of immediately swinging into action mode and start doing things.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Great points. We've reached the end of this session already. I hope it was useful. Was it? Yes, yeah. Thank you so much for all our action holders, for making us enthusiastic about your work. And this is really prototype. So the idea is that, the next phase is to make this bigger and make it scale and see how we can apply it. So you're, again, very welcome to join these working groups. A lot of email addresses were already shared. You can also write to Alexander Medic at Partos if you have general questions or want to, join in. He's sitting there with a great black and white jacket. Alexander at Partos.nl is how you can find him and connect to any of these groups. And please do. We have sessions coming up in 13 minutes now. And I want to show you what's happening. In here, at 11:30, we will have a great panel on digital futures and how all these terms that we might or might not be familiar with, from NFTs to Web3 to AI and everything else, relates to our work. We also have another session starting, the NGO activist collaboration in the workspace. So that's another thing that you can, a cooperation between practitioners and academia, sorry. That's starting at 11:30 in the workspace. The other one is still ongoing. So you can choose where you want to be, and I wish you a great time.